Even if you've given a cursory listen to the news this week, you've heard Joe Rogan is under fire for spreading misinformation about vaccines and some alleged racist comments he made years ago. Now, his friend Sam Harris, who is a renowned atheist, philosopher, and neuroscientist, released a recent podcast episode that provided some honest criticism and praise of Rogan. And ultimately, Harris used Rogan's heated controversy to teach a lesson on apology, acceptance, and forgiveness within a culture that should desire moral virtue. Listen to what he had to say.
Even if Spotify drops his show, Joe will be fine. It would be trivially easy for him to create his own platform, where he'd be answerable to no one, and legions of his fans would follow him there. And he would still have the biggest podcast on earth. But he chose to apologize because he genuinely regretted saying certain things. And he felt bad about how their resurfacing made many people feel. And that's exactly how you would want him to respond. So in my view, he took a risk by apologizing. And he did this because it was the right thing to do. Here's the culture I think we want, or should want. We want people, when they feel they have done something wrong, to apologize. This is a way for them to express regret over regrettable things, and to communicate their goodwill toward anyone they may have hurt, however inadvertently. I've never had to issue a public apology of the sort that Joe has released twice this week. Perhaps my time will come, but if I ever felt that there was something I really should apologize for, I would find it very depressing not to apologize for fear of the apology backfiring. A sincere apology is a moral good, as is the forgiveness with which it is often met. We want to live in a world where people offer sincere apologies, and we want to live in a world where sincere apologies are generally accepted. This is born of the recognition that no one is perfect. Each of us is a work in progress. Everyone is growing, and forgiveness itself is one of our highest virtues.
Harris wrapped up that segment with a pretty bold statement, using an expletive to describe how forgiveness is a miracle. Yes, seeking and bestowing forgiveness is a real problem in our culture. Worse than that, it's not even practiced with those whom we love. To be honest with you, I have a natural tendency to get even or become bitter with people who wrong me. Forgiveness is not the first virtue that often comes to mind. Harris's thoughts beg the question, why is forgiveness preferred over revenge or, say, indignation? As long as cultures view morality as relative or subjective, I'm not convinced it matters in any real sense. Let me explain what I mean by moral relativism. It's simply illustrated by the phrase, what's moral or true for you isn't necessarily moral or true for me. It's based on the philosophy that objective or absolute truth is an illusion, and therefore there's no real standard of moral values and duties. We ought not to do anything because there's no real moral obligation to do it. So then, what ought to motivate people to forgive one another in a real moral sense? Especially if someone has repeatedly abused us, mistreated us, cheated on us, lied to us, and the list goes on. How many times do we forgive a person? The concept of forgiveness means to overlook an offense by treating the offender as not guilty. The offender is pardoned by the offended, and therefore, by definition, the offended no longer takes offense. There's no wiggle room for malicious words, anger, bitterness, or vengeance. According to the Christian worldview, we ought to forgive one another because Christ forgave us. This is a fundamental virtue of our faith. The Bible reminds believers, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice, and be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. Colossians 3 tells us, Put on, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, bowels of mercies, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long-suffering, forbearing one another, and forgiving one another. If any man have a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you, so also do ye. And Jesus instructed his disciples how often they should forgive. Then came Peter to him and said, Lord, how oft shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times? Jesus saith unto him, I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. While Harris might feel forgiveness is a good virtue, it is merely subjective and without any real standard in his view. Now, some philosophers have found ways to somehow justify moral realism without an ultimate transcendent moral law giver. But I am not sure how objective morality exists without God. Christians do not believe moral values and duties are relative. We believe they have real truth value. They actually matter objectively, regardless of how anyone feels about it. Forgiveness ought to be practiced because God will forgive anyone who calls upon the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, by faith. Colossians 1:14 says, in whom we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sins. You're tuned into Actual Faith. My name is Jeremy. This channel and podcast is committed to building the faith of Christians through a biblical worldview. Be sure to subscribe and like this video if you're enjoying the content. And remember, faith is not a blind leap of ignorance into the dark. Actual faith is trusting and believing the unknown because of the known. If you would like to learn more about truth and forgiveness, check out this video I created on what is truth.